It's one of the best reset buttons that you could have for a baby who's missed their nap and for a parent who is frustrated. And if they're really tired, you might find that a baby's hands are fisted, that they're crying and they're arching and they're hyperactive. But I want to suggest that sometimes these signs aren't about being overtired at all. Welcome to the Baby Sleep Connection, a podcast that explores baby sleep and more through the lens of attachment and development. I'm your host, Heather Boyd. I'm a mom of 3, an occupational therapist, and a certified infant and family sleep specialist. If you are a tired parent who wants to support your baby's sleep holistically, keep listening as we delve into approaches that go well beyond the usual strategies of wake windows and bedtime routines. Your baby's sleep is connected with so much more. Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Baby Sleep Connection. I am your host, Heather Boyd, and I have a story to share with you today. I know that many of you already know through your own experience with parenting that parenting does not always go as planned. Or maybe I should rephrase that and say parenting often doesn't go as planned. And when that happens, we do our best to roll with it. Well, I will admit that the same kind of philosophy is needed a bit for this episode of the podcast. I had an interview booked and recorded and ready to be edited to be released this week, and it is nowhere to be found. It is not part of the plan that I would lose a recording, especially with this particular interviewee. It was a phenomenal interview, and I am just keeping my fingers crossed that we can rebook it. But it was feeling a little bit like losing a car the day before a big trip when everything's already packed and ready to go and you assume that the car is out there and you go out to look and it's gone. So I am living the whole idea of adapting and rolling with it with this podcast. So I actually bumped up one of the topics that I was going to talk about in a little bit. And that topic, of course, if you saw the title, you know, is all about overtired babies. I would say this is one of the biggest concerns that parents have is that their baby is overtired. So we're going to dig in deep today and explore it. So I want to start by saying that there is a great deal of fear surrounding the idea of babies being overtired. And I don't think it's just because of social media. My youngest, I remember being so afraid that I would not do it right and he would end up overtired and cranky and it would make sleep harder. Now, I find with the clients that I work with, their fear of their baby being overtired leads them to avoid making any change that they think is going to add to the problem. So they avoid changing the timing of sleep or the length of wake windows or capping naps to try to lead to more sleep pressure to lead up to bedtime. These are all things that, if applied right, under the right circumstances, can really make sleep easier. So when we have fear that is blocking our ability to even try something that can make it easier, we're kind of in this vicious cycle of continued challenge with sleep when there is something that we can do about it. I'd also like to point out that there may also be a false assumption wrapped around in this, and that is that overtiredness, if we're afraid of it, it must be for a reason, right? That overtiredness is going to lead to no sleep, like our baby is not going to fall asleep. And although it is often true that when babies are overtired, it is trickier to get them down, I want to point out that something that I covered in a previous episode, and that is that sleep is driven by 2 main things. The first is sleep pressure, and that is something that builds and builds and builds the longer that your baby is awake, and then it subsides as they fall asleep, and the longer that they fall asleep, the more that sleep pressure subsides. And of course, we have the second piece of that, which is circadian rhythm, which is linked more with the sun and nighttime in terms of supporting sleep. And so we have this false assumption, I think, perhaps, that overtired leads to zero sleep, when in fact, we know that sleep pressure is really important and necessary to have sleep. So there's something else going on, and that something else is what we'll explore next, because I want to go over what are the clues that you would have that you would see if your baby is overtired. And I'm going to list some of the things that I include in a PDF that I give to clients that I work with for signs to look for when their baby is getting tired. Now, the PDF that I share with clients is broken down into early signs and kind of middle zone signs, and then late, like really kind of missed the boat, overtired, or a child that went from 0 to 60 tired really fast. And so we often see with overtired babies, we'll see the yawning and eye rubbing, maybe sucking their fingers, being a little bit more disengaged, maybe cranky, disorganized. They might be fussy or a little bit clumsy with their toys or with their movement, a little more likely to fall. They get clingy. They want to be with you or held by you a lot. And if they're really tired, you might find that a baby's hands are fisted, that they're crying and they're arching and they're hyperactive. Now, each of you has probably seen some of these signs in your baby and recognized them as overtired, but I want to suggest that sometimes these signs aren't about being overtired at all. I want you to consider what would happen if your baby was overstimulated. So had a lot going on, lots of outings or lots of new people holding them or lots of new experiences that they had to manage, including starting to go to daycare or having festivities that really change the day and change the whole layout of what's happening. And with an overstimulated baby, you might see them looking away. You may also see this when they're tired. They're disorganized. They might be disengaged. They might be fussy and hyperactive. And you can see already the overlap between these two lists. And I want to add, just to make things spicy, a third option. And I've seen this with some of my clients, and it's been so helpful to point out that this is a possibility when you're seeing some of these signs. And that is that the third option is your baby may be bored. And when they're bored, they may look away or sigh. They may be disengaged as well because they're just not interested in the toy or the activity or what you're doing. They could be rubbing their eyes as well. I've seen this with babies. And they could be getting frustrated or restless or fussy. And so you can see that between overtired, overstimulated, and bored, there is a lot of overlap. Here's why I think there is so much overlap between these three. I think underneath all of these three isn't necessarily what is happening on the surface, but it's what's happening in the nervous system. And what's happening in the nervous system is you have a baby who is dysregulated, who doesn't have that balance of engagement with their environment. And yes, it could be from overtired, but it could also be overstimulated or bored. In fact, perhaps even overtired is just a form of being overstimulated. Their body has high sleep pressure. They need to sleep to relieve it. And anything that they're doing is overstimulating compared to what their body actually needs, which is to go to sleep. So I want to talk a little bit about what we see when babies really are overtired. And this relates back to the idea that sleep pressure is building the longer that kiddos are awake. It builds for us too as adults. It just takes longer to build. Unless, of course, you have a baby who is waking up often and you could probably sleep anywhere, anytime. But aside from that, we and babies have sleep pressure that builds. That sleep pressure involves adenosine in our blood that goes up and up and up and up. And the thing that relieves it is sleep. Now, sometimes we miss the cues, or our babies aren't giving very clear cues. And a side story, if your baby is highly sensitive, there's a better chance that they are not giving really clear cues. They may be less regulated overall in terms of their routine, and so that can be really hard to see. So sometimes we miss it, and sometimes it just isn't there. And it's not that you're missing anything at all. It just isn't there. When we've missed that sweet spot for sleep, when sleep pressure is high, but babies are still feeling pretty regulated because they're getting what they need from us. Perhaps we've started a familiar bedtime or nap time routine and they kind of know what's happening and things are trucking along towards nap. But if we miss that sweet spot and babies are overtired and dysregulated, there's something else that happens to the architecture of sleep. and it's called the wake maintenance zone. And this wake maintenance zone is where babies will not be able as easily to fall into sleep. In preparing for this podcast, it got me thinking that this wake maintenance zone is partly to help us as adults to not fall asleep really early, even though we've been awake all day. Because we don't want to go to sleep at 5 p.m. and wake up really disoriented and confused at 8 p.m. because our circadian rhythm is going to be saying it's nighttime, time for bed, and our sleep pressure is saying, no, we're out of here, we're fine. Like, it's going to take us another several hours to build up. So the wake maintenance zone is useful, but with babies, that wake maintenance zone means that there may be a period of time where no matter how hard you try, no matter what you do, your baby is not falling asleep. Now, what often happens is parents are very invested in making sleep happen because you know they've missed a nap, or you just know that they're overtired. And so what do? You double down and you try even harder to get them to sleep. The challenge with that is if they are in the wake maintenance zone, it's going to be a while before they're either regulated or their body is ready again with a bit of a lull, where that sleep pressure can draw them back into sleep. If it's evening time, that circadian rhythm is supporting them. And so you have this period where the harder you work, the more frustrating it gets because they are no closer to sleep no matter what you do. If you recognize this situation, if you've been in this situation where you are working so hard to get sleep and you work for like 45 minutes to an hour and a half, it may be that your baby is in that wake maintenance zone. And here's what I suggest when you get stuck with trying to put a baby down to sleep in a wake maintenance zone. Stop working so hard on sleep. Take a break. Get out of the sleep space into the living room. Sit down on the floor and play quietly together. Snuggle together. Read books together. Step outside and get some sunshine. Anything to get you out of that frustrating loop of trying really hard for sleep that's not happening. Then go back in and try again when they have that second little lull. There may be that zone where they could drift off again. It may be 45 minutes to an hour after you thought they were supposed to go down. And instead of staying in that nursery working really, really hard, you can actually enjoy a little bit of your time before you try again. When I have parents that take me on with this and decide that they're going to keep an eye open for those opportunities that were missed, and then they get an opportunity to test out this wake maintenance zone kind of approach. And what I find happens is parents are relieved that they're not spinning their wheels trying to get sleep at a time that it's not happening. And again, these are usually times where you're determined that your baby is overtired and needs sleep. And so you're not easily giving up. The fact is that you could stay in that room trying to make sleep happen. They'll probably fall asleep at the same interval that you would if you just took a break and got out of the room and started over. Only coming out of the room is a lot less stressful and a little bit more enjoyable than staying in the sleep space and trying really hard to get them to sleep. It's the upping the ante part that I think is really hard with this wake maintenance zone. There's this really high pressure on parents to not have their kids be overtired. That goes back to this fear that we have of having our babies overtired. And ultimately, I think when we look back at that architecture of sleep, the sleep pressure, it can get really high and then they miss a nap. So it's even higher, which means sleep is going to come at some point. But really high sleep pressure can feel really uncomfortable and can dysregulate. And that feels yucky. So if you step out of the room, you can at least regulate yourself well. And if you've listened to any previous episodes, you know I talk about the importance of self-regulation for sleep. So I want to go through 6 strategies on what to do if your baby is overtired. So I'm going to start with 3 that are related to if your baby is missing a nap. And you'll see I covered some of these already just in chit-chatting about these points about the wake maintenance zone. The first step, if your baby missed a nap, is don't sweat it. There are no long-term consequences to missing a nap. So chalk it up to parent experience or something that was worth it, something that you added to your schedule that you are so glad you took part in that you don't do every day. And so don't sweat it, just drop it and move on. The second strategy, if your baby misses a nap, is that co-regulation piece. Rock, bounce, or swing your baby if those are things that help your baby regulate. Connect for play or for cuddles or for reading, something that's highly connected so that your baby can regulate their nervous system. And step outside into that sunshine, into nature. It's one of the best reset buttons that you could have for a baby who's missed their nap and for a parent who is frustrated that a baby has missed their nap. I'll also suggest that you can try again later. It does not mean that the nap is not going to happen. It just might not happen when you expected it to. That's when you can pull in that knowledge that you have now on the wake maintenance zone and know that you just stop trying for now and come back to it in 40, even 45 or 60 minutes later. Now, I have 3 more strategies to share with you, and these are for the families that truly feel that their baby is chronically overtired. It may be that family environment is chaotic and there are other kids or pets, or the timing of sleep just isn't aligning with their sleep need because of daycare pickup or drop off, or because of school pickup for older siblings, or any number of other reasons. Perhaps there's a health issue too that has gotten in the way, such as colic or reflux or other issue that makes sleep more difficult for your baby. So here are 3 things that you can do if you think your baby is chronically tired and you have some time, energy, and attention to address the situation and see if we can find a way through the overtired loop that you might be in so that everybody can get the sleep that they need. The first strategy I have is to find a stretch of a few days to stay home. Now, many of the reasons I listed for why your baby might be chronically overtired is environment. And if your home environment isn't conducive to allowing you to have this stretch of 3 days, then you can ignore this strategy. But if you can, here's why staying at home can be helpful. You can stay home and pull away all the layers and busyness of all the other aspects of your life that might be getting in the way of seeing your baby's natural sleep pattern. When do they show sleepy signs that you might miss if you're out and about a lot during the day? What is the easiest way to get them to go to sleep when the timing seems right? What is their natural wake window? Is it predictable, or is it all over the map and not helpful to you? Are there certain times of day that are easier for sleep? All of this is much easier if you can have a little bit of a stretch at home where you're not packing the day with lots of errands or social events, and your goal is to observe. It's not to change. It's not to fix sleep. It is simply to observe. By being at home, you have this stretch of time to just be an observer and a scientist collecting information about when your baby needs to sleep, when they sleep most easily, and what is it that they need from you to sleep easily. The second strategy I have, if you think your baby is chronically overtired, is all about the sleep invitation. The sleep invitation means being in an environment that's conducive to sleep. So make routines that fit well with the flow of inviting sleep. Babies tend to like patterns and predictability. Not all babies, but many do. And so if we provide a bit of a predictable condition of things that happen that lead up to the sleep invitation, that lead up to nursing to sleep, or whatever it is that you're going to do to help your baby to sleep, it can be helpful. The other piece with routines are to make them pleasant. Routines should be something you enjoy and look forward to, not something that you dread. I'll also say that the other strategy for this is to offer sleep in the easiest way. That means that this is not the time to be trying to put your baby down drowsy but awake. It is not a time to stop nursing to sleep or rocking. You want to do what works most easily so that you can see that pattern of sleep for them. Once you see a pattern or something consistent coming from your baby, that's what you can hang on to and build off of to create a flow to the day, to create sleep offers that are going to be aligned with when their sleep pressure is high and they're ready for sleep. And it's just going to be a lot easier. So the third strategy that I have for those of you who feel that your baby is chronically tired is to look at your baby's total sleep over a 24-hour period. We've talked about that in previous episodes. I'll link those episodes in the show notes. The idea around looking at what your baby's needs are over a 24-hour period is we know developmentally sleep needs drop. So if you think your baby is chronically overtired because you're adding up the numbers and it's not matching with what you think they need, it may be that their need has dropped. So you can add up daytime sleep and you can add up nighttime sleep to get a total. I'll include a link to a resource actually for this podcast that will give you a PDF that will have the breakdown of what the National Sleep Foundation consensus on number of hours of sleep in a 24-hour period for your baby's age. You may be surprised that your baby's sleep need is actually less. It may be less because they're older now, but it also may be less if they are a kiddo who has a lower sleep need than average. And you can appreciate that I get my fair share of clients who have babies that have lower sleep needs than average. So I want to do a quick recap for those of you who are worried about the overtiredness from your baby. The first is that overtiredness is not as common as we're led to believe. And second, it doesn't usually have the significant consequences that we're led to believe. Lastly, you have strategies and tools now from this episode to be able to support your baby, whether they are overtired, overstimulated, or bored, so that everyone can get more of what they need. For you that may be working less hard on your baby's sleep and using up all that energy that you could use for something else. And for your baby, it may be that they need more sleep, but it may be that they need a change of scene as well. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I am so glad to have you on this journey with me through all the ups and downs, the parenting ups and downs, the sleep ups and downs, and yes, even the lost podcast episode ups and downs. Before you go, I do want to let you know about an upcoming event through my sleep practice. I am having the first ever Family Sleep Ask and Answer on June 18th. There will be a link in the show notes to sign up. With the sign up, you also get a replay of last month's masterclass, Why Isn't My Baby Sleeping? You'll have a curated resource list that I will build based on the questions that get asked during the Ask and Answer. And you'll also have a replay of the Ask and Answer for the rest of the month of June. So sign up on that link. It's June 18th at 11:30 Eastern Time, and I'd love to meet you there. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I do hope that you found the information and perspectives in this podcast episode helpful to you as you navigate your baby's sleep development. Of course, this podcast provides general information and it isn't tailored to your family's reality or the specific needs of your baby. If you're concerned about your baby's sleep or health, be sure to reach out to your healthcare provider. If you're feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and you need a place to feel nurtured and reassured, you can find me on Instagram at familysleep.ca. Until next episode, look for the connections that support you and your baby.